University research requires funding. Most of the world's challenges are going to be solved by thought leaders at universities and private research labs. But to do the work that the important work that they're going to do, they need access to funding sources. Many of those funding sources are targeted. Both federal, state, and private funding sources will target specific outcomes, research outcomes that they want to get done. They might be targeting, say, cancer research or climate change or other environmental and social problems that they want to see solved. And the alignment between the capabilities and skills of the researchers and the goals of those funding sources is really critical to addressing problems that matter and to making sure that researchers have the funds and the capabilities that they want. To achieve this, many universities and private institutions have a team of research officers who act as matchmakers. These research officers have expertise and understanding of who are the key researchers at their organization, what their capabilities are, what their research goals are. And then they also understand of the new grant opportunities that come out. They will understand what those grants are targeted for, what the requirements are, what the eligibility requirements are, what the constraints are on those opportunities. And they will use that knowledge to try to do the matching between researchers and funding. Ideally, when that works well, they have fully funded research staff that grow the university's reputation, and they achieve great research outcomes. However, what we heard from some of the previous work we had done was that these matches don't always go as smoothly as we'd like. So to better understand the problem, we did a quick journey starting last year. We actually teamed up with Wilfrid Laurier University, and we did a joint survey to better understand how does this process work, how does those matches get communicated, how do they get made, and what kind of feedback do those research officers get on the process. So we've gone through a survey, we looked at the findings, we've shared those findings back. Some of you may have even participated in it, and we shared the results back with people who asked for it. I'm going to give a quick summary of that and then indicate where we're going next with that. So the survey went out to over 20 universities and research institutes. We talked to people at over 20 different roles, and we got over 40 responses from across research institutes and private research labs across Canada. You can see we had institutes of various sizes with the research office ranging from, say, 1 to 5 people to up to over 20 people. And what we often find is that a research officer represents somewhere between 50 and 150 or maybe even 200 researchers at many of these institutions. So you're looking at people who represent the work of thousands of experts and researchers at universities and private labs to do this work. A couple of highlights of what we heard is that one of the challenges in this process is the relevance of what gets communicated out. So often that research officer, since they're dealing with maybe 100 or more different researchers, they don't always have fine-grained detailed knowledge of exactly what that lab is trying to do. So often the things that they might recommend for a particular lab are not perfectly aligned. And then the method that they use to communicate it out is often done as a batch newsletter. So they'll send out an email or publish a newsletter on a website that says, hey, for our Earth Sciences lab or for our Health Sciences lab, here's a set of opportunities, new grants perhaps that are coming out. And the expectation is that the individual researchers are going to go through that list and figure out, are some of these relevant to me or not, and get back to them if they are. And then their metrics and ways of tracking this are not always ideal. The best practice is that the research officer will keep track of who's responded, how many opportunities they put out there, but they don't always have the ability to do that. And usually if they do, they're keeping track of it on a private spreadsheet or some sort of a personal list. And so it's not shared among all the research officers, and it's not always up to date. So the vision we got from this is this notion of this research officer who's under relentless pressure to do these matches to help support the research institutions. They've got thousands of grants, new ones coming out every day. They have this challenge of doing this very complex matching process. They're not experts in these fields, and yet they're expected to understand which opportunities are best aligned with which research labs. As I mentioned, they have over 100 researchers in many cases, and they have spreadsheets for different departments, different labs, different people. And this is complicated by the fact that these offices usually have high turnover. So these people might move from one university to another or change to a different role. So they're often relearning the people and the processes, and there's a steep learning curve to get up to speed. They often get a poor response rate when they send notifications out. They don't always get good feedback from the research teams. And then there's fierce competition. So when they're applying for funding, they know that their peers at other universities are also applying for the same funding. So they want to make sure that they're early, that they're relevant, and they get the best opportunities aligned. We did a quick market scan to say, are we the only people thinking about this? And yes, we see that there are some other tools out there. Common themes among those other tools is that they often require that the researcher themselves learn how to use this new tool, that they actually log in and they actually use the tool. Often it's in the form of a search engine. So you as a researcher can go and search for grants that match you. The challenge we see with that is a lot of these researchers are busy. They want to spend their time doing meaningful research. They really don't want to spend a lot of time doing work of looking through grants and opportunities. They want somebody to help them with that. So we said, well, what if we did this differently? What if we could provide relevant and targeted matches to the researcher without them having to create a profile or spend a lot of their time doing administrative work, without them having to learn a new application or remember a new password to log into something, and really help support the research office to do their job, but make better use of their time actually helping apply for grants rather than just doing this matching problem. And if we did this, what would the outcome be? Well, it's a bit audacious, but we think if you do this successfully, we're going to help produce better outcomes for society. We're going to help produce, move the needle on some of those key challenges that the world faces, and make a real difference. And we're going to help the universities who use the tool to actually increase their ranking. So they're going to have more funding coming into their labs, and they're going to rank better. And then we're going to make more effective use of the research officers themselves. They're actually going to be helping do applications and the meaningful work of getting funding in and tracking that funding rather than doing this matching process. And ideally more engaged researchers who spend most of their time doing meaningful work as opposed to administrative work. Now, how do we do that? Very high level, a couple of elements. This is the high level workflow of what the system does. A couple of key pieces to this. One is an automatic grant opportunities feed. So we have a process that goes out and pulls in grant opportunities from various websites, puts them into a common database, and then we apply some proprietary algorithms that we've developed in-house to do what we call matching. The matching will look at the capabilities of a researcher and apply that against the grant opportunities and the requirements, identify the highest probable matches, what we think is going to work best. And then instead of sending out a generic newsletter or creating a search engine that the researcher can use, we're actually going to send out targeted messages to the researchers or professors to say, here's the matches that we found for you. And we're going to track what feedback we get from them. So we have a closed loop process there. We did a quick experiment being an aggressive startup. Rather than building this whole system out and investing a lot of time and effort into making all the technology work up front, we actually did a quick experiment, again, working with Wilfrid Laurier University. We were able to pull in funding information from a variety of federal and regional funding sources. And we ran a match algorithm against a handful of professors. And we said, is our algorithm good enough to make relevant matches? And the answer was yes, actually. The feedback we got from the research officers and the professors was that, yeah, these are actually more relevant than things they've seen before. So again, the key at the center of all this is that proprietary matching algorithm, the way that we pull in the automatically grabbed or pulled in grant opportunities and the information we have about the professors, most of which we can get from websites and publications, and we do that automatic matching. This is a quick example of what one of those notification emails might look like. So rather than getting a broad newsletter that says, here's 50 opportunities that you might want to apply for, instead, we're going to the professor with one or two to say, here's some really high probability matches that we think are good for you. If you're interested, click here. If not, then just let us know and we'll change our algorithm so that we don't bug you with things that are not aligned anymore. And that I'm interested button is kind of magic because they don't have to do any kind of login. If they click on that button, it confirms that, okay, you're interested in this. The research officer will follow up with you. Here's the next steps of what's going to happen next. So they don't have to learn anything or do anything other than read their email and respond yes or no to these matches. And from there, the process is largely automated. Now, on the research officer side, they actually get a more rich dashboard where they get to see a nice single pane of glass view of here's all of my researchers and what opportunities I've shared with them and what kind of feedback I've gotten. And key to that is those metrics. So you can imagine this is made up data, of course, but in the future we'll have detailed data of how many of those emails we sent out, how many were accepted, and how many were clicked through. And if somebody hasn't gotten back to me, I can give them a call or walk down the hall and talk to them in person, so I can take it up a level if that's necessary. So again, very audacious goals, but that's research impact at a very high level. We think we can help solve some of the global challenges through better alignment of research with targeted funding, and we can also enable research institutions to have a greater impact on the world.